The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold foil lettering. "Margaret and David request the pleasure of your company." I ran my fingers over my son's name, feeling a familiar surge of pride mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. After 3 years of dating, David was finally marrying Margaret, and despite my reservations about her, I was determined to make this day perfect for him. I should have trusted my instincts about Margaret from the beginning, the way she'd dismissively corrected my pronunciation of quinoa at their engagement dinner, how she'd rolled her eyes when I mentioned my volunteer work at the animal shelter, the subtle way she'd redirect conversations whenever I shared stories about David's childhood. But I bit my tongue because my son loved her, and his happiness was all that mattered to me. The morning of the wedding, I carefully wrapped my gift, a vintage Rolex Submariner that had belonged to my late husband, David's father. Thomas had worn it on our honeymoon, to David's first Little League game, to his high school graduation. It was meant to be passed down, and this felt like the perfect moment. I'd had it restored and engraved. "To David, time stands still for true love. Dad would be proud. Love, Mom." I arrived at the venue early, wearing the navy dress I'd splurged on and the pearl necklace Thomas had given me for our 25th anniversary. Several guests were already mingling in the cocktail area when I approached the seating chart display. My heart stopped. There, in small print near the bottom of the alphabetical listing, Eleanor Hayes, Table 12. Table 12. I found it on the floor plan, tucked away in the far corner next to the service entrance and the restrooms, while Margaret's great-aunt Phyllis, whom I'd met exactly once, and who had spent the entire evening complaining about her arthritis, was seated at table 3, right near the head table. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the chart, hoping I'd misread something. But no. The mother of the groom, who had raised David alone after his father's death, who had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, who had been nothing but gracious to this woman who clearly disdained her. I was relegated to what might as well have been the children's table. "Mrs. Hayes," Margaret's voice rang out behind me, syrupy sweet and perfectly pitched for public consumption. She glided over in her pre-ceremony dress, a flowing white number that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Margaret," I managed, forcing a smile. "Everything looks beautiful." "Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry about the seating. We had such a challenging time fitting everyone in. You understand, don't you? Family politics and all that." She touched my arm with fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. "But you'll love Table 12. It's very intimate. Intimate." Right next to the bathroom where guests would be constantly shuffling past, I watched her float away to greet someone else, someone who was apparently worthy of a table with actual silverware instead of plastic cutlery. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an oversight or a space constraint. This was deliberate. This was Margaret's way of putting me in my place, showing me exactly how little I mattered in their new life together. The ceremony proceeded without incident. I sat in the 3rd row. Thankfully, that seating arrangement had been David's responsibility, and watched my son beam as he said his vows. For a moment, seeing his joy, I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe I should just grin and bear it for his sake. But then came the reception. Table 12 was somehow worse than I'd imagined. Not only was it positioned near the bathroom, but it was partially blocked by a service station where waiters dumped dirty dishes. The table itself was smaller than the others, crammed with Margaret's distant relatives who barely spoke English and seemed as confused about their placement as I was. I watched the head table, where Margaret's parents held court like royalty. Her mother, Patricia, kept shooting glances in my direction with a satisfied smirk. It was clear this seating arrangement had been her idea, executed by her daughter. They'd planned this humiliation together. The final straw came during the gift opening. Margaret made a show of gushing over each present, reading the cards aloud for the entire reception to hear. When she got to mine, she held up the Rolex box without opening it. Oh, how lovely. A watch from Eleanor. She didn't read my carefully written card. Didn't mention the significance of the piece. Just set it aside like it was a generic gift from a distant acquaintance. I watched my son's face, hoping he'd say something, anything, to acknowledge what that watch meant. But he was distracted, laughing at some joke from his best man. He hadn't even noticed his mother's gift being dismissed. That's when I realized that Margaret hadn't just disrespected me, she'd successfully diminished my importance in my own son's eyes. And I was done being treated like a second-class citizen at my own child's wedding. I excused myself from table 12, claiming I needed some air. Instead, I walked purposefully to the gift table. The Rolex box sat there among the other presents, pushed to the back behind more elaborate packages. I palmed it smoothly and slipped it into my purse. But taking back the watch wasn't enough. The anger that had been building all day, hell, all 3 years, was demanding more than just retrieving a gift. It wanted justice. I found the wedding planner, a harried woman with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset who was coordinating the cake cutting. "Excuse me," I said, adopting my most concerned tone. "I'm Eleanor Hayes, David's mother. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I just received an emergency call about my elderly mother. I need to leave immediately, but I wanted to make sure you could pass along a message to Margaret and David." The woman nodded sympathetically. "Of course. What would you like me to tell them?" "Please let them know that I had to rush to the hospital, but that I left their gift with Margaret's parents for safekeeping. The small box on the gift table. It's quite valuable, so I entrusted it to Patricia personally." It was beautiful in its simplicity. When Patricia inevitably claimed she knew nothing about any gift, it would look like either she was lying or someone had stolen it. Either way, it would cast a shadow over their perfect day. But I wasn't finished. I approached the DJ booth during a quiet moment between songs. "Hi there. I'm the groom's mother. I was hoping you could play a special song for David. It's one his late father loved, and it would mean so much to him." "Of course. What's the song?" I gave him the name of a piece that Thomas had indeed loved, a beautiful but melancholy instrumental that would completely kill the party atmosphere. He might not request it himself because he gets emotional, but trust me, it would be perfect right after the father-daughter dance. Really set the tone for the evening. The DJ made a note, clearly pleased to be part of such a touching tribute. My final stop was the coat check, where I'd seen Margaret's honeymoon bag earlier. "Hi, I'm Margaret's mother-in-law," I said to the teenage attendant. "She asked me to grab something from her honeymoon bag. It's the Louis Vuitton one. She needs her medication." The girl handed it over without question. I found what I was looking for. Margaret's passport. Not to steal it, of course, just to relocate it. I slipped it into the side pocket of a random garment bag hanging nearby. She'd find it eventually, but probably not before spending her wedding night tearing apart their hotel room looking for it. I left through the back exit, avoiding the main reception area. As I walked to my car, I could hear the music from inside. They were just starting the father-daughter dance. Soon, the DJ would play Thomas's song, and the mood would shift from celebratory to somber. Margaret would notice her seating chart sabotage when people started asking about the missing gift. And sometime late tonight or early tomorrow, she'd discover that her passport wasn't where she'd left it. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The phone started ringing at 8 the next morning. "Mom, what the hell happened last night?" David's voice was tight with anger. "Margaret's parents are saying you stole something, and you just disappeared without saying goodbye?" "I received an emergency call about your grandmother," I said calmly, sticking to my story. "I told the wedding planner to pass along my message. Didn't you get it?" "We got some garbled message about a hospital and something about leaving a gift with Margaret's parents, but they swear they don't know anything about any gift." "Mom, did you take the watch back?" The hurt in his voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. David, I would never steal from your wedding. I'm insulted that you'd even suggest such a thing. I left your gift with Patricia personally, because I didn't want it sitting unattended. Well, she says she never saw you, and now the gift is missing. Margaret's upset. Her parents think you did this on purpose, and frankly, I'm starting to wonder myself. I let the silence stretch out, then said quietly, I'm hurt that you'd believe them over your own mother. But if you think I'm capable of ruining your wedding day, then maybe it's better that I wasn't there to embarrass you further. It was masterful manipulation, and I hated myself for it even as the words left my mouth. But I could hear David's immediate shift from anger to guilt. Mom, I didn't mean… It's fine, sweetheart. I hope you and Margaret have a wonderful honeymoon. Give my best to everyone. I hung up before he could respond. The second call came that afternoon. Margaret herself, her voice shrill with barely controlled rage. I know what you did, Eleanor. I know you took that gift back. And I know you messed with our seating chart somehow, because 3 different people asked me why the groom's mother was hidden in the corner like we were ashamed of her. I'm sorry you're having problems with your wedding gifts, dear, I said sweetly. Perhaps you should be more careful with valuable items. As for the seating, I thought it was perfect. Very intimate, just like you said. The sharp intake of breath on the other end told me she'd caught the barb about her own words. You also told our DJ to play some depressing song that completely killed the mood after my father-daughter dance. People are still talking about how weird it was. I requested a song that your husband's father loved. I thought it would be a nice tribute. I'm sorry you found it inappropriate to honor your late father-in-law at your wedding. Another pause. Margaret was smart enough to realize that any complaint about that would make her look heartless. This isn't over, Eleanor. I certainly hope not, dear. Family is forever, after all. The third call came from David again, later that evening. Mom, please. Margaret can't find her passport anywhere, and their flight to Italy leaves in the morning. She's convinced you had something to do with it. And honestly, after everything else… I'm sorry to hear about Margaret's disorganization, I replied. Perhaps she should retrace her steps. I'm sure it will turn up somewhere logical, like wherever she left it. Mom. Yes? Did you really just leave? Without saying goodbye? After everything we've been through together? You couldn't even stay for the cake cutting. The pain in his voice was real, and for the first time since yesterday, I felt a stab of genuine remorse. This was my son, my baby, and I had missed one of the most important moments of his life because of pride and wounded feelings. I'm sorry about that, sweetheart. The emergency call about your grandmother really shook me up, and I didn't want to cause a scene by getting emotional in front of all those people. You know how I am. It wasn't entirely untrue. I was emotional, just not for the reasons he thought. Is Grandma okay? She's fine now. False alarm. The lies were getting easier, which should have worried me more than it did. They found Margaret's passport 3 days later in someone else's garment bag, exactly where I'd put it. The couple who'd inadvertently taken it home called the venue, deeply apologetic about the mix-up. Margaret and David ended up taking their honeymoon 2 weeks later than planned, but they got their trip to Italy. The missing watch, however, remained a mystery. David asked me about it twice more over the next month, and each time I maintained my innocence with hurt indignation. How could he think I would do such a thing? What kind of mother did he take me for? Margaret, to her credit, didn't push the issue publicly, but I could see in her eyes at family gatherings that she knew exactly what had happened. There was a cold calculation there now when she looked at me, a recognition that I wasn't the pushover she'd thought she married into the family. The seating chart incident became family legend. Margaret's friends and relatives spent months discussing how strange it was that the groom's mother had been seated so poorly. Some blamed the wedding planner, Others suggested it was an honest mistake. But the whispers followed Margaret everywhere. Her mother, Patricia, defensive and embarrassed, insisted it had been a space constraint, but the explanation sounded hollow when everyone could see that less important guests had been given better placement. The real victory, though, came 6 months later. David called me on a Thursday evening, his voice subdued. "Mom, we need to talk about something." I braced myself, wondering if Margaret had finally convinced him to confront me directly about the wedding incidents. "Margaret and I have been going to couples counseling," he began, and my heart sank. "We're working through some communication issues and, well, the therapist thinks it would be good for all of us to have a conversation about boundaries and respect." "What kind of conversation?" "Margaret feels like you've never really accepted her into the family, and honestly, Mom, some of the things you've said and done, they've hurt her feelings." I bit back my first response, which would have been to point out that Margaret had started this war by treating me like an unwelcome stranger at my own son's wedding. "I'm sorry to hear that, David. I've always tried to be welcoming to Margaret. If I've fallen short, it certainly wasn't intentional." "She specifically mentioned the wedding. She said you seemed angry about the seating arrangement and then you disappeared without explanation. It really hurt her that you didn't seem happy to be there." The revisionist history was breathtaking. Margaret had somehow spun her deliberate slight into my fault, portraying herself as the wounded party who just wanted her mother-in-law to be happy for her. "David," I said carefully, "I was seated at a table next to the bathroom, far from family, while virtual strangers were given places of honor. How exactly was I supposed to feel about that?" "Mom, it was just seating. It didn't mean anything." "Everything means something at a wedding, sweetheart. Every choice is deliberate." There was a long pause. I could practically hear him struggling with the cognitive dissonance. "Will you come to counseling with us? Just once? To clear the air?" I agreed, curious to see how Margaret would handle being confronted with her behavior in front of a neutral party. The session was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I arrived exactly on time to find David and Margaret already seated on a beige couch across from Dr. Sandra Chen, a composed woman in her 50s who specialized in family dynamics. "Mrs. Hayes," Dr. Chen began, "David and Margaret have shared some concerns about communication within the family. I'd like to hear your perspective on these issues." Margaret jumped in before I could respond. "Eleanor has never really accepted me. From day one, she's made it clear that I'm not good enough for David. At our wedding, she was so obviously unhappy that she actually left early, which was humiliating and hurtful." "I left early because I received an emergency call," I said evenly. "But even before that," Margaret continued, "she was cold and distant. I tried so hard to make her feel included, even giving her a lovely table where she could easily access the facilities when she needed them, since I know older people sometimes need more frequent breaks." The sheer audacity of reframing her insult as a kindness left me momentarily speechless. Dr. Chen, however, looked intrigued. "Margaret, can you tell me more about the seating arrangement? What factors did you consider when deciding where to place family members?" "Well, I wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable. Eleanor's table was very convenient, close to the restrooms and the exit in case she needed to step out. And the other people at her table were lovely. I thought she'd enjoy meeting some of David's extended family." "David's extended family?" I interrupted. "Margaret, everyone at my table was from your side. I didn't know a single person there." Margaret's composure flickered for just a moment. "That's not... I mean, there was Cousin Jennifer." "There was no Cousin Jennifer at my table, Margaret. There was your great-uncle Roberto who doesn't speak English, your college roommate's mother, and 3 people I'd never met before in my life." Dr. Chen was taking notes now, her expression carefully neutral. "David, how did you feel about your mother's seating placement?" My son shifted uncomfortably. I didn't really think about it at the time. I was focused on, you know, getting married. Margaret handled all the reception details. But looking back now, I pressed gently, do you think it was appropriate for your mother to be seated at the table farthest from the family, next to the bathroom, while strangers were given seats at the family tables? The silence stretched out. David's face was cycling through emotions: confusion, realization, and something that looked like embarrassment. Maybe that wasn't the best placement, he admitted quietly. Margaret's mask slipped completely. You're being ridiculous. It was one table at one event. You're acting like I committed some crime. I'm acting like someone who was deliberately humiliated at her own son's wedding, I replied, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling underneath. And I'm trying to understand why you would do such a thing to someone who has been nothing but kind to you. Kind? Margaret laughed, a harsh sound that filled the small office. You've undermined me from day one, making little comments about how I'm not domestic enough, how I don't cook like you do, how David used to love this or that when he was growing up. You've never given me a chance. The truth was finally coming out. This wasn't about seating charts or missing gifts. This was about control. Margaret resented my relationship with David and had decided to establish dominance by publicly diminishing me. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Margaret, even if you felt criticized by Eleanor, do you think the seating arrangement was a constructive way to address those feelings? I don't think I did anything wrong, Margaret said, but her voice had lost its earlier conviction. What about the gift? I asked quietly. What about it? The watch I brought to your wedding. The one that belonged to David's father. What happened to it? Margaret's eyes darted to David, then back to me. I don't know what you're talking about. The Rolex Submariner in the blue box. The one you held up during the gift opening and then set aside without reading the card. Where is it now? David was staring at his wife. What watch, Margaret? We never got a watch from my mom. The room went dead silent. There were so many gifts, Margaret stammered. Maybe it got mixed up with something else. Mixed up? My voice was ice cold now. A Rolex Submariner that belonged to your husband's deceased father just got mixed up? Dr. Chen had stopped taking notes and was watching the exchange with sharp attention. This had clearly gone far beyond typical family communication issues. Margaret, David said slowly, do you know what happened to my mom's gift? I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no spin that would work. She had no idea where the watch was because I'd taken it back, but she couldn't admit that, without also admitting she'd lost track of a valuable family heirloom. I'm sure it's somewhere safe, she said weakly. Wedding gifts sometimes get confused. Confused? David's voice was rising. My dad's watch got confused? That's when I understood that I'd already won. Not because of my petty revenge schemes, but because Margaret's true character was finally showing itself. The woman who could callously seat her mother-in-law by the bathroom was the same woman who could lose track of an irreplaceable family heirloom and then lie about it. I stood up slowly, smoothing my skirt. Dr. Chen, thank you for your time. David, I love you more than life itself, and I want you to be happy. But I won't be treated as a second-class citizen in my own family. I turned to Margaret, who was now pale and clearly panicked. As for you, dear, you've made your feelings about me crystal clear. I hope you're satisfied with the family dynamic you've created. I walked out of that office with my head held high, leaving behind a marriage that was about to have its first real crisis. David called me that night. Mom, I found the watch. My heart stopped. You did? It was in your jewelry box when I stopped by to water your plants, along with a card I'd never seen before. Damn, I'd forgotten about the card when I'd put the watch away for safekeeping. David. Time stands still for true love. Dad would be proud. Mom, this watch, it was Dad's? Yes. And you were going to give it to me at the wedding? Yes. Another long pause. When David spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Why didn't you tell me Margaret had dismissed your gift? Why didn't you say anything about how they treated you? Because it was your wedding day, and I didn't want to ruin it for you. But you took the watch back? I did. And the other stuff? Margaret's convinced you sabotaged the DJ playlist and somehow made her passport disappear. I could lie. I could maintain my innocent act and let Margaret look paranoid and accusatory. But sitting there in the dark of my living room, holding the phone that connected me to my son, I realized I was tired of the games. Yes, I said simply. I did those things too. The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Why? He finally asked. Because your wife humiliated me at your wedding, David. She deliberately seated me like I was an unwelcome guest instead of the woman who raised you. She dismissed the most meaningful gift I could give you like it was junk from a clearance rack. And when I tried to address it respectfully, she lied and manipulated the situation to make me look unreasonable. So you decided to get revenge? I decided to remind her that actions have consequences. Another pause. Mom, I need some time to think about this. Margaret she's really upset. Her parents are talking about whether we should consider this elder abuse or something. I laughed despite myself. Elder abuse? David, I'm 62 and in perfect health. I'm not some confused old woman who can't remember where she put things. I'm your mother who was treated badly and responded accordingly. I know, but nothing. Your wife started this war the moment she decided I wasn't worthy of basic respect. If she wants to play victim now that someone fought back, that's her choice. The conversation ended awkwardly, with David promising to call me later and me telling him I loved him no matter what. He didn't call for a week. When he finally did, his voice was different. Tired. Maybe. Older. Mom, we need to talk. I'm listening. Margaret and I have been talking with the counselor about boundaries and respect and other things. We're going to work on some stuff. That's good, sweetheart. She owes you an apology for the seating thing and for how she handled your gift. She knows she was wrong. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with something that might have been regret. And I owe you an apology too. I should have paid more attention to how you were being treated. I should have noticed that seating chart and said something. I should have made sure your gift was acknowledged properly. I let you down. My throat tightened. David, no, let me finish. You raised me better than that. You taught me to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves, and when it mattered most, I was too wrapped up in my own stuff to stand up for you. You were getting married. You were allowed to be focused on your bride. Not at your expense, Mom. Never at your expense. We talked for another hour. David told me about conversations he'd been having with Margaret about family dynamics and respect. How the therapist had helped him see patterns he'd been blind to. How Margaret was struggling with her own insecurities about measuring up to the woman who'd raised such a good man alone. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped explain it. She wants to make amends, David said. Really make amends, not just apologize because she got caught. What does that look like? She's planning a family dinner. She wants to cook for you. And before you say anything about her not being domestic, she's been taking lessons. She wants to ask you about Dad, about family traditions, about things she should know as part of this family. And you believe she's sincere? I think she's scared. I think she realized that her behavior could cost her the relationship with me, and that you're not someone she can just steamroll into submission. She's not used to people standing up to her. I considered this. Margaret came from money, From a family where hired help handled problems and social position was assumed rather than earned. She probably had never encountered someone who would fight back with equal cunning. "I'll think about it," I said. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you still have Dad's watch?" "Yes." Would you would you still want to give it to me, even after everything?" I closed my eyes, picturing Thomas's face the day David was born, how he'd held our son like he was made of spun glass, whispering promises about all the things they'd do together. The baseball games and fishing trips and long talks about life that got cut short when cancer took him 12 years ago. "Yes, sweetheart, that watch was always meant to be yours. I'd like to come get it this weekend, if that's okay. I'll make your favorite dinner." "Thanks, Mom." "And Mom, yes, I love you. Even when we disagree, even when things get complicated, I love you." "I love you too, baby." Margaret's apology dinner happened 3 weeks later. She served pot roast, not quite like mine, but edible, and spent 2 hours asking genuine questions about David's childhood, about family traditions she wanted to continue, about Thomas and what kind of father he'd been. It was awkward and stilted, clearly rehearsed, but it was also real. She was trying, and the effort showed. "Eleanor," she said as I was preparing to leave, "I need you to know that the seating thing wasn't. I didn't mean for it to be as insulting as it was. My mother convinced me that you'd prefer a quieter spot, and I just went along with it without thinking about how it would look or feel." "But you knew how it looked," I said quietly, "when people started commenting on it." "Yes, I knew, and I was embarrassed, so I got defensive instead of apologizing. That was wrong." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. What I saw instead was a young woman who'd made a mistake and was genuinely trying to fix it. "Margaret, I'm not trying to compete with you for David's love. There's enough of him to go around." "I know that now. I was scared that you'd always see me as not good enough. And I guess I decided to reject you before you could reject me. I never would have rejected you." "I know that now, too." We hugged before I left, tentatively, like strangers learning to trust each other, but it was a start. David wore his father's watch to their first anniversary dinner. Margaret had suggested he wear it, he told me later, because she thought Thomas should be represented at family celebrations. When she posted photos from the evening on social media, she made sure the watch was visible and tagged me with a heart emoji. The war was officially over. Looking back now, I realize that my elaborate revenge plot had been both successful and unnecessary. Successful because it forced Margaret to show her true colors to David and eventually led to real change in our relationship. Unnecessary because the truth would have come out eventually anyway. It always does in families. But sometimes, when someone tries to make you disappear, the best response is to remind them that you're still there, still standing, still capable of fighting back. Margaret learned that I wasn't someone to be dismissed or disrespected. David learned to pay attention to how the people he loves treat each other. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't a dish served cold. It's a wake-up call served with perfect timing, forcing everyone involved to see the situation clearly for the first time. The Rolex still keeps perfect time, just like true love should. And every time David checks it, he remembers not just his father, but the day his mother reminded everyone that she was a force to be reckoned with. Some battles are worth fighting, even at weddings, especially at weddings, where every gesture and every slight is magnified and remembered forever. Margaret wanted to write me out of the story of her perfect day. Instead, she gave me the perfect opportunity to write myself back in, as the woman who wouldn't be moved, wouldn't be silenced, and wouldn't let anyone treat her as less than she was worth. The mother of the groom, taking her rightful place at last.